A pleasant day to all. This is Nina Agnes Banak from presenter number 10. And together with my group mates, we are going to tackle about the learning plan assessment tools, covering digital and non-digital tools. And before we proceed to our discussion, let us know first our objective for today. The first objective is for the students to distinguish the various digital and non-digital assessment tools. And the second one is to utilize at least one assessment tools presented. And the last one is to share their experiences regarding the assessment tools that they have already explored. But before I present to you the various assessment tools, let us know first what is assessment tools. So as per definition, assessment tools are techniques used to measure students' academic abilities, fluency and skills in a specific subject, or to measure one's progress towards academic proficiency in a specific subject area. So assessment tools can also be used to help support active learning, facilitate team building activities, and to foster peer-to-peer learning. According to Jacobs in 2010, incorporating 21st century teaching practices should start with updating teachers' arsenal of assessment strategies that they use in a classroom to support their teaching. So, in the 21st century teaching, of course, we need 21st century skills. So, as a future educator, we are expected to be able to utilize various digital tools used for assessment. And now, I will be presenting to you some of the digital assessment tools used by 21st century teachers. Presented on the screen is the first half of digital assessment tools that we're going to talk about for today's session. So we have here Kahoot, Microsoft Teams, Padlet, and Quizzes. Now, let us talk about Kahoot first. Students love Kahoot's game-based approach to learning and assessment. Teachers can choose from more than 40 million ready-to-go learning games or create their own in minutes. Host games live or as assignments. I guess we're already familiar with Kahoot and we know how interactive this digital tool is. Kahoot can be used in assessing students. Take, for example, in your lesson plan, you can utilize Kahoot in your activity. It will be a nice interactive activity to test the prior knowledge of your students before you begin your lesson. Alright, so the second digital tool that we are going to talk about is the Microsoft Teams. It is a persistent chat-based collaboration platform complete with document sharing, online meetings, and many more extremely useful features for business communication. The platform offers an online collaboration space in which teachers and students can share notes, chats, and meetings, assignments, and even apps. If you can still remember, we have already used Microsoft Teams when we were freshmen in college, as Mr. Orson Sabuga has introduced it to most of us. I can remember how I was struggling when I first used it because I'm not familiar with it and it just seemed so hard to use. But later on, I handled it just fine. And the nice thing about the Microsoft Teams is that it can cater so many students at one place. Because if I remember it correctly, Mr. Sabuga opted to use the Microsoft Teams because his Google Drive and Google Classroom gets full in just a span of time because it was bombarded with, I think, a few hundreds of students or maybe thousands because he was catering all of the freshman students at that time for the ROTC. So it is expected that it will be a lot of students and they will pass their videos and their documents and then his Google Drive will get full, so he opted to use the Microsoft Teams instead because it can cater a lot of students. It serves just like a Google Classroom but upgraded with the online meeting because in the Google Classroom you can't have meetings, right? We can just meet in a separate app like Google Meet. But here in the Microsoft Teams, it is like a one-stop shop where everything you need is there. You can meet your class, you can have your assessment, and you can also have your lectures there. Okay, so much for that. Let's move on to Padlet. Padlet gives teachers a blank slate to customize their own platforms and add numerous media resources like videos, images, helpful links, a classroom newsletter, fun classroom updates, lesson materials, answer to questions, and more. We have already utilized Padlet on our TTL1, I think. There we have posted our answers on a board where we can even customize the color or design. And we have made our own Padlet, if you remember. And now let us move on to Quizizz. Quizizz is a learning platform that offers multiple tools to make a classroom fun, interactive, and engaging. As a teacher, you can create lessons, conduct formative assessment, assign homework, and have other interactions with your students, and it is for all grades. If I am not mistaken, Ma'am Janet gave us a quiz through this app and it was fun, though it is heart-pounding because there is a timer and the music is intense, but overall it is good. The Quizizz is a good digital assessment tool that we could use in assessing the knowledge of our students. So that ends my part in this report, and I hope that you have grasped some knowledge from it. And I'll be giving the floor to Ms. Baclayo as she will present the second half of the digital assessment tools. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, this is Jayanam Baclayo, your second reporter for this afternoon. Now let's continue to another set of digital learning assessment tools, and these are that follows: Google Classroom, Google Forms, Edpuzzle, and Kugel. I know you're not familiar with these two, but we'll discuss it later on. At this point, let's have Google Classroom. What is Google Classroom? We are all familiar with this ever since pandemic hits. It is defined as a mission control for classes. As a free service for teachers and students, you can create classes, distribute assignments, send feedback, and see everything in one place. In a long-distance learning, we are utilizing Google Classroom because it is convenient, instant, paperless, and easy. You can post learning materials, assignments, exams, and of course, send feedback for your students' work in the context of assessing their output. Another digital learning assessment tools is Google Form. Does that ring any bells? I bet it does, because we usually utilize this during examinations and surveys. To define Google Form, it is a free online tool from Google which allows users to create forms, surveys, and quizzes, as well as to collaboratively edit and share the forms with other people. Educators can use Google Forms to assess their students at the beginning of the class and gauge pre-existing knowledge, as well as at the end of the class. Furthermore, Google Forms can be used to give feedback to and receive feedback from students and parents. Similarly, students can use Google Forms to assess their own learning and set the learning goals, as well as to collect data for their research projects. If you want to design your own Google Form, you can select the blank template. There are many types of questions you can include in a Google Form, including short answer, paragraph response, multiple choice, checkboxes, drop-down, linear scale, and multiple choice grades. You can embed images and video directly into a form, which is a great way to assess what students think and learn immediately after viewing the image or video. You can also include an upload feature for students to upload their work. Is that clear? Moving on, let's have Kugel. Kugel is an online tool for creating and sharing mind maps. This tool is aimed at helping individuals take notes, brainstorm ideas, visualize connections across concepts, and collaborate with others. Mind map tools help individuals connect ideas, synthesize a large volume of information, explore relationships between concepts, think creatively, and retain information. Google provides a collaborative workspace where users can share ideas, solve problems, and communicate complex information. We all know it can be challenging to help students retain information, let alone develop critical thinking skills and the ability to make connections for deeper learning. It can also be difficult to assess these skills. Mind maps and concept maps can be useful tools for student learning, instruction, collaboration, and assessment. And one online tool for sure, Kugel. It can be visually appealing and provides an enjoyable space for individual and collaborative learning. Let's hop on to the next one. Since some of the students are visual learners, it works well with Edpuzzle because it allows you to turn videos into a quick assessment. And Edpuzzle is a free assessment-centered tool that allows teachers and students to create interactive online videos by embedding either open-ended or multiple-choice questions. Or it could be audio notes, audio tracks, or comments on a video. Edpuzzle interactive videos can be made with videos from a number of websites, including YouTube, TED, Vimeo, and National Geographic. You can also trim video, insert quiz anywhere, and track your students' progress.
Now, let us discuss the learning plan assessment tools focusing on non-digital resources. What do we mean by non-digital resources? It means those teaching learning resources which are developed or used by a teacher or any other individual, not with the help of digital technology. What is assessment? It is a process of documenting knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs, usually in a measurable terms. The purpose of conducting an assessment in education is to improve the current teaching method for teachers and the learning process for students to derive better results. According to SHE 2014, teaching and learning resource selection are an important aspect of teaching and learning activities, which can largely decide what and how teachers teach and what students learn. Selecting teaching resources to help make your lessons interactive, interesting, effective, and most importantly, challenge each student, at the same time meet the needs of the students for them to attentively listen, for learning to take place, and application will be possible. Now let us proceed to our main topic, which is the learning plan assessment tools focusing on non-digital resources. We have the traditional pen and paper test. But before that, what is a test? According to Macmillan Dictionary, a test is a set of written or spoken questions used for finding out how much someone knows about a topic. The obvious point of classroom testing is to assess what students have learned after the completion of a lesson, determine students' strengths and weaknesses, and measure effectiveness of teaching. Now let's move on to the pen and paper types of test. Educational test. Primary function is the measurement of results or effects of instruction. It's used to examine someone's knowledge of something to determine what they know or have learned. For example, achievement test. It is a test of developed skill or knowledge. The most common type of achievement test is a standardized test developed to measure skills and knowledge learned in a given grade level, usually through planned instruction such as training or classroom instruction. Psychological tests are written, visual, or verbal evaluations administered to assess the cognitive and emotional functioning of children and adults. Example of this is essay test, which are probably one of the oldest methods of psychological tests that are created to check the candidate's ability to organize and articulate his or her thoughts clearly and, of course, logically. Mastery test. It measures the degree to which an individual has mastered certain instructional objectives or specific learning outcomes, how well they can apply that knowledge to broader problems. Examples includes quizzes and exams, which measures what students know after the unit is presented. It allows students to demonstrate mastery of the presented material. Survey test. It measures a student's general level of achievement regarding a broad range of learning outcomes. Example, dichotomous questions. This asks for a yes or no, true or false, or agree, disagree response.
Individual tests administered on a one-to-one basis using questioning. Individual test measures how well you have understood the basic concepts and ideas of psychology as a science and learning into a psychological phenomenon. For example, individual intelligence test. Second one is the group test, in which administered to groups or individuals work as a team, or it could be group work assessment is defined as a comprehensive concept including all the types of feedback, evaluation, and assessment that are carried out in connection with students working in one group. For example, is the oral interview and the summative test. Number 3 is the group test. Items are arranged in increasing order of difficulty, or it could be also a power test, contains items that vary in difficulty to the point that no subject is expected to get all the items right, even with unlimited time. And the next is the speed test. The speed test and accuracy test with which the pupil is able to respond to the items are then measured, or it could be the primary objective of speed test is to measure the person's ability to process information quickly and accurately, while under the doors, for example, is the clinical accuracy test. The fifth is the verbal test. Make use of words, or it could be mental test, consists of items measuring the vocabulary, verbal, listening, and comprehension. Verbal listening tests reveal how well you can analyze the written information, or usually the format is the short passage of text followed by true or false and cannot say questions. For example, verbal reasoning test and the aptitude test. Number 6 is the nonverbal test, or it could be paper and pencil test or oral test, involve drawing or physical objects. Aptitude tests that assess the candidate's ability to interpret the visual information and solve problems using the logic and reasoning. For example, in this is the nonverbal reason test. Number 7 is the informal test, constructed by classroom teachers. It is a method of evaluation where the instructor tests participants' knowledge using no standard of criteria or rubrics. For example, is the quizzes and long test. Number 8, we have here the standardized test, or it also known as the constructed by experts, administered and scored under the standard conditions. Or it could be test is a method of assessment built on the principle of consistency. All test takers are required to answer the same questions, and all the questions are graded in the same predetermined way. For example, is the NC and NAT. Number 9 is the criterion reference test, or it could be compares an individual's performance to acceptable standard of performance, or it could be a criterion reference test is a style of test which uses the test scores to generate a statement about the behavior that can be expected of a person with that score. And while the number 10 is the norm reference test, it compares to the individual's performance to the performance of others, or it could be require varying item difficulties. For example, is the entrance exam. That would be all. Thank you and God bless.